he tend to look at the monetary policy based more on his economic model. I guess it's more to do with his academic background, right?
So I'm really excited to talk to you again, Wallace.
Hey, same here.
Right. So tonight we're going to talk about two topics. One is Bitcoin, and the other one is the two Fed chairperson, the former one and the latest one. So we'll start with Bitcoin. So I understand that you have some recent experience with Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, actually, around 2 weeks ago, I've just been to a Bitcoin store, like with my friend. Actually, is to be more precise, we are talking about a Bitcoin machine being set up at one of the cafe in downtown Vancouver. Is on House Street. So next time, if you or any of your friends come to Vancouver, you may want to go there and take a look.
Right. It's kind of like an ATM, right? It's not a printing machine. It's not like a bank, but it's more like a ATM type, right?
Yeah, it's pretty like automatic. So you basically, you just follow the instructions and then do the exchange and transactions. Yeah.
Right. So in our Cantonese show, we talked about this, but we'll talk about it maybe from different angle, whatever. So with currency in the old days, the currency itself has some value, right? Like gold or silver. And even shell, I mean, in the old days, it looks good on the ladies or on men, who knows? But gold, they have physical use. But with Bitcoin, digital currency, there's no use, right? I mean, there's zero use.
Well, traditionally, people tend to use, precious metals, to be the medium of exchange, namely gold and silver. And the characteristics involved would be durable, divisible, and also the quality, supposed to be consistent. But I guess once we start to abandon precious metal and use, the government-backed money,
Is it called fiat money, right? I mean, it's
which has nothing to do with precious metal,
right.
right?
Yeah, it's just piece of paper.
Any
Yeah.
particular metal. Um, Things have changed anyway. So now, for Bitcoin, it's a very new concept. If you look around the economic textbooks, I would bet you that 99% of them haven't covered Bitcoin yet.
Right. It's so new. Yeah.
So I guess it's too early to say whether it will succeed or fail. At the end of the day, if people are willing to use it to buy stuff and the sellers are willing to accept that, so there's some kind of legitimacy of it. But I guess there are also a lot of challenges for Bitcoin. So to me, I guess I would just need more time to see how it goes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just breaking news in the last few days. Bitcoin was under attack, right? I mean, there was some denial of service attack on one of the Bitcoin. I don't know how to call it. I mean, not a bank, but I think an entity was under attack, and then that entity has to shut down its withdrawal. So it's issue of trust, right? I mean, even just look at our new currency, the polymer currency that we have in Canada. Like people have to figure out, okay, this is what is a real $50 notes feel right? But with Bitcoin, with a digital currency, you kind of have to trust a lot more. Like I am a technologist at heart, I suppose. I'm a computer scientist. I'm a trained computer scientist. But even I cannot be certain and sure that is that valid and is there been cracked and is there been stolen. There's this funny case I've heard that someone actually go on TV and then flash a card or something, and then the QR code got captured by someone, and then that piece of money got stolen. It's like they have no idea. I mean, in the old days, sure you can get my serial number of my money, but then it's not going to affect it, right? But with Bitcoin, my understanding is there's stuff that you can't have to keep away. But yeah, so yeah, I guess it's new things, lot of very new challenges.
Yeah, but having said that, I have a feeling that this kind of computer or electronic money, whatever you
Yeah,
call it, right?
cryptocurrency, yeah, based on
Yeah, well,
cryptography.
yeah, there. My feeling is that it will end up, having a potential to survive. It may be Bitcoin, it may be some other different types of of Bitcoin under different names. Um, and I would say that after a number of trials and errors, it will start to improve by itself. The users, the one who produce that, they will start to think about better practices to improve the security or whatever problems they are facing now. So who knows? I mean, now is still full of problems, but after 5 or 10 years, it may become more commonly used.
Yeah. Well, again, in the last few days, I think Bitcoin won an award from TechCrunch, being one of the best technology or something. But again, I'm the type that I'm a technologist myself. I love the technology. I think it's fun. But at the same time, I'm allergic to just jump onto a brand new bandwagon and think, oh, that is the coolest technology. It must be good and solid. Well, no, not really. Even the cryptographic expert, Bruce Shiner. He was saying like he'd look at the cryptography briefly and he couldn't find any problem yet, but briefly, right? So briefly. So even an expert could only look at it briefly and then so far couldn't find any problem. So who am I to say there's no technical problem? But he also point out it's more of an issue with political issue, an economic issue surrounding the currency itself, instead of just technology. But yeah, I think it's definitely maybe a few generations down the road has the potential. One thing I want to point out also, I think in the old days, many years ago, who would thought not eBay, but PayPal has that kind of influence in the digital economy, right? But now PayPal is kind of a standard on payment. Obviously, PayPal is not a digital currency. PayPal is just like a way for people to pay in whatever currency, US or whatever, and then or via the credit card is still linked to our solid monetary system. Whereas Bitcoin is different. It's a virtual thing. Someone creates it, and it's not backed by any government, right?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely something, we should spend time to keep an eye on it. I guess, in 3 to 5 years, we'll have a better idea of how it goes.
Right. Keep an eye on it. Be interested and be curious. My point, my advice is don't speculate on it too much. I mean, unless you like speculating on Brix and you may be the lucky one that make a few bucks. But at the end of the day, it could be a scam, right? I'm not saying Bitcoin is a scam, but hey, be aware that you're speculating, and if you are comfortable speculating and maybe losing everything, then I mean it's fine. Or you could make money. I don't know. I mean, so our next topic it's your area, Wallace. Go ahead, Fed shares, the last one and the latest one.
Okay. Our in our world, the U.S. currency is still the most dominant currency. So I think it's quite interesting to look at the development, especially the Federal Reserve has just changed its leadership. Ben Bernanke stepped down at the end of January, and Janet Yellen, who used to be the number two, now has taken up the leadership. So I guess a lot of people, for the past few weeks, they started to talk about the legacy of Ben Bernanke. How well he did his job as the chief of the Federal Reserve. My opinion is that I guess that there are two major things that we can talk about. Number one is how well he managed the monetary policy. But the other thing is, I think compared with Bernanke's, previous one, which is who's Alan Greenspan, Bernanke definitely made the whole monetary policy make it more institutional regarding the decision making and also the communication with the public. Which, in the eyes of a lot of academia, they see it as a positive thing. The Federal Reserve is getting more transparent. The market, has a better idea of how the Fed is, what the Fed is working on. That I guess to a certain extent I agree. But I think we're also talking about running into a risk that if the Federal Reserve is too transparent and too explicit in its objectives, what if the objectives are not being met? It would, and the Federal Reserve will run the risk of damaging its credibility. Now, going back to the monetary policy, I think Bernanke, he didn't do a very good job at the first half of his term, especially before the subprime crisis. He was a little bit, I would say he was not that sensitive to the market compared with Alan Greenspan. He tended to look at the monetary policy based more on his economic model. I guess it's more to do with his academic background, right? He tended to be relying on the very formal kind of information, versus Alan Greenspan. He may be more street smart. So I guess in the first half of his term, he was a little bit too slow, and especially when the market started to turn bad, as some people criticize him for not being fast enough to do something, like cutting interest rate drastically enough, to smooth out the situation. But after the markets crash, he did a pretty decent job to help the market, to stabilize the market and to help the market from further going down. At the end of the day, I think he spent a lot of his time as a researcher to study the Great Depression back in the 1930s. So as the market was getting very bad, and basically what he needed to do was to stop the market from turning, to stop the recession from turning into depression, he was actually courageous enough to try different things, including like the twisted operation, the three rounds of QE. So I would say the second half of his term, he was actually doing a pretty decent job. So I think in general, I would say that he is a pretty good Federal Reserve chief, but I probably would not rank him as high as individuals like Warren Buffett, because Warren Buffett said very highly of him. To me, I think he still has his weaknesses, especially in the first half of his term.
Right, and I like to add. I mean, in the first half of his term, or things that a problem that he inherited from Alan Greenspan, right? So with Alan Greenspan, one example I like to point out is there's a chairperson of the governing body of option tradings and whatnot, Brooksley. And I think at the time she actually warned Alan Greenspan and the Treasury Secretary at the time, Rubin, right, Robert Rubin, that hey, wait a minute, this thing shouldn't be regulated and whatnot. And I think Greenspan just brushed her off, right, and basically saying no, let the market do its thing, and then no need to regulate and whatnot. And obviously, since then we learned that the over-the-counter derivatives, the whole derivative bubble, it's not just the subprime mortgage; it's the bets that people are betting on it one way or another that expand the whole thing and make it into a super disaster, right?
Yeah, I guess, when you look at economic policy, at the end of the day, it's always politics, right? At Greenspan's time, people are making money, Wall Street, they are earning high profit.
Right.
If you as a regulators, talk about, doing something,
Yeah.
basically hurting the interest, you can imagine how big the resistance is.
The lobby groups and whatnot would be screaming bloody murder, right? But then,
Exactly,
but then it's a catch 22, right? I
in
mean, yeah.
2008 and 2009, right? The regulators, they had every reason to say, see, now I have to do something, the old practices no longer worked.
Right.
So I guess at the end of the day, politics, timing, those are often overseen by economists, but they are just so real. I mean,
Right. So are you resigning to say that sometimes we have to learn from lessons? We cannot like be ahead of think ahead and think, hey, wait a minute, this is going to explode. Let's regulate it now. Regulations. People just don't like regulations.
yeah, especially if talking about a lot of people's profits would be affected.
Right, the
You
bonuses. Yeah.
mentioned. Yeah, but I guess when the economic crash really comes, then no more excuses can be made.
Right.
The
So,
time.
in closing, let me ask you to introduce Janet Yellen to us a little bit. Tell us a little bit of her background and just introduce to our audience what is she like.
Oh, Janet Yellen, she actually has been working in the Fed for many years. She was the second-hand lady to Ben Bernanke, and
Red hand lady.
yeah,
Right.
so she
Vice.
yeah, so she's very experienced. When you look at her academic background, and also when when you Google the presentations that she used to deliver, all I can say is that she seems to be a very reasonable person, and she's also very evidence based when talking about policy. She tends to use data to back her up. So I think she should be a very good choice to lead the Federal Reserve. And I guess the Federal Reserve for the coming few years would be very different from the Bernanke's time, which is tapering, how to reverse the QE and how to prevent the inflation from clicking in and getting out of control. That would be a major challenge
Right.
to Janet Yellen and the Federal Reserve.
Right. So in terms of the inflation rate, let me throw this out. So what will be a good scenario and what will be a really disastrous scenario in the next like few years?
I guess the worst scenario would be something called a stagflation, which is that the unemployment rate remains to be high, but the inflation starts to click in. Now, what would the Federal Reserve to do? Would it like increase the interest rate? That would make the already high and unemployment rate even worse, right? But if it doesn't do anything and just continue with the loose money policy, then the inflation would become out of control, like what we experienced back in the 1970s. Now that would be the worst scenario, stagflation, right? Uh, you know,
High unemployment and then inflation just
basically,
keep on shooting up and then
yeah,
you get
the
double
inflation
whammy.
keeps on shooting up and the unemployment rate doesn't come down. I guess the best scenario would be that the economy starts to get better and better, and unemployment rate is uh, you know uh, keeps coming down,
Unemployment rate keep
and
coming down.
the inflation rate starts to click in, but at a very gradual kind of movement, so that the Federal Reserve can have a lot of time and room to gradually raise interest rate to curb the inflation from getting out of control. That would be the most optimistic and ideal situation.
All right. Well, that's cool. Well, we'll see about how the economy turns out, and with the Fed chair, the Janet Yellen, the first female Federal Reserve chairperson,
And
and
I add one more point. I guess
go ahead.
in the future, Fed chief like Janet Yellen, it would be a harder job for her and for whoever succeed her, because I think under globalization, right? Monetary policies of different countries, they are affecting one another. So it's no longer focusing, or you can only focus on the internal economic situation. You also have to look at your economic partners and think of it as in a more comprehensive way. And the external economic forces would also affect your monetary policy.
Right.
So to a certain extent, I kind of I'm a little bit sympathy to Janet Yellen, because she is now at a time, the job is not easy.
Right, and we'll keep an eye on how digital currency, cryptocurrency, or other digital currency like Bitcoin will evolve in the coming months and years. It will be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. All right, well, thank you very much, Wallace.
Okay, thank you.